how do you know that you can retire? Well, it's pretty simple, right? You're actually going to have more income coming in than you're spending, but how much are you spending? And maybe you don't have that dialed in right now and you don't want to go through a complex process to figure it out. We're going to give you a simple formula today to determine how much you're spending so that you can figure out if you can retire today. Hello, ladies and gentlemen. I am here today with my good friend and co-host for these Friday editions of the podcast. Got Marshall Johnson here with me.
Hey.
This is our opportunity to cover a weekend reading article with you.
Yes.
What is that? Well, that is an email that we send to you every single Friday. We do all the research. We gather all the articles. We sift through them and drill down to 4 articles on trending topics in the financial planning space, all designed to help you make better financial decisions on your way to and through retirement, everything from estate planning to investment planning to income planning. Those articles are going to come to your inbox, 4 articles, along with a bonus article every once in a while from myself, as well as takeaways and summaries, white paper giveaways, webinar invitations, book giveaways, all kinds of great stuff. You can sign up by visiting us at retirewithpurpose.com, or you can just text the key letters WR to 866-482-9559. We'll send you a link to get you signed up to receive that weekly email. We're going to be highlighting an article today from Kiplinger, and it is titled "An Easy Way to Find How Much You Will Spend in Retirement." Now, Marsha, I chose this article because I think it has some really good takeaways for those that are listening, not necessarily chocked full of incredibly valuable information.
That's what I wanted. I wanted the incredibly valuable equation that he referenced in the title.
I first saw it and I thought, oh boy, an easy way to find out how much you spend in retirement. Maybe he does it like we do.
I'm in.
And I was wrong. He doesn't do it quite
I got an
like
easier
we do.
way. Look, I should reach out to Patrick. I'll give him an...
But
it is a good article. It is a good article.
This is a big deal because this is something that I find that a lot of retirees, you might be surprised, especially you're listening to this podcast, you already dialed in your budget, I'm sure. But most of the families we meet with don't know how much they're spending month to month when they come in to visit. And we have to help them determine how much they're actually spending each year. Usually, they'll give us a number. Usually, they're wrong.
Ballpark.
Right? Like wildly wrong in many instances.
Yeah, and I will say, when folks are younger and the families are younger, it's like you know exactly how much you spend because you know how much is in the checking account. You're tight. You're on a tight budget. You know exactly how much you spend. But as the kids get out of the house and incomes go up and you start to become a little more comfortable, that spending does tend to creep up. And a lot of my clients will say, we don't really keep a budget like we used to. So I don't know exactly how much we spend, but we know we're going to have to tighten up when it comes to retirement. Yeah. But the reality is...
quite often I ask that question, and I have so many instances that I can't go through all of them, but I've heard, I'd say, how much you spend how much are you going to need in income in retirement? And they go, oh, yeah, mortgage is paid off.
We don't have any debts.
Cars are paid off. We don't have any debt. So, we got some utilities. Probably $600 a month.
Insurance premiums.
Maybe $1,200 a month.
Maybe $1,200, $1,500.
And I'll see that. I'll hear $1,000, $2,000 a month, and I'm going, there's no
Wait a minute.
way. Yeah. Just because all you have in the way of bills is your utility bill or maybe a small credit card bill, it doesn't mean that's all you're spending. Quite often you're spending more than those things you have to pay. We have to separate these things into your non-discretionary expenses, your discretionary expenses, and quite often families will only think about those non-discretionary items that they have to pay for when they're stepping into retirement. But the reality is you want to live a big life, right? You want to live a big retirement like Fritz Gilbert often talks about. Like we want to live the same life, at least maintain our standard of living. We want to live a good life in retirement, and that means we're probably going on a vacation every once in a while, maybe playing a little golf, maybe going on a fishing trip, going out to eat with our friends or having them over for dinner and throwing some filet mignon on the grill, right? All those things take money, and we need to figure out what that gap is. And as you said, in those early years, we might be tracking. I know a lot of the friends that I have, they're using different apps to track their spending. My wife and I, we use an app that tracks our spending. We'll look at what those expenses are. And then at some point, I just find we kind of get away with that because we end up with significant income and less in expenses. And we go, well, I'm saving every year. I got enough. And we just stop paying attention as closely as we used to. Typically, when we get into those higher income earning years, those 50s and 60s, and we need a way to very simply, very quickly determine how much we're spending, because that's the core equation. If we have more income than we're spending, then we can retire.
Right. And I think the point here is the root of a lot of anxiety about retirement planning and do I have enough and will I have enough is all around that spending number, right? It's the most important number. Is not so much how much you've saved, and I think we focus on that too much. Like it's got to be $2 million or $3 million or $5 million.
How much do I need to retire? Yeah. And how much are you spending?
Yeah, it's all about spending. It's not so much about how much you've accumulated or how much risk you're taking in the stock market. It's about how much you're spending.
Yeah, and then we can back into the plan itself. But I think you really shouldn't be meeting with an advisor until you know a basic budget. You know how much you're spending.
Don't say that, because like one of the number one reasons for not working with a financial advisor is fear of judgment when they come in the office, right? So you don't give them more things to be fearful about. Maybe work through it with the advisor, right?
It's
like marriage counseling. It's like, well, he's the spender, she's the spender.
Let me say it this way then. Set up your expectations that's what's going to happen in the meeting, right? If you don't have your expenses dialed in, don't walk into that meeting expecting to get delivered a financial plan without first going through that discussion with your advisor around expenses, and maybe using a formula like this fella did, which was take the last 12 months of total withdrawal numbers from your bank account, add them up, and that's how much money is going out the door each year. To me, that seems like a lot of work. Now I have to go through 12 bank statements for the last 12 months.
I don't know if I could do that. So you're right, but I like what he says. Most people have one or two checking accounts where they pay. Most people have one, but let's say you have one or two, then you're just looking at the inflows and outflows.
Yeah,
right.
And that's simple enough, I guess. It's just it's not the way that we usually do it. I don't think it's the easiest way. It's not the way that you're going to be able to do in your head.
It's not like the headline suggests. The easy way to find out how much you spend, I think
it's not the simplest way.
Yeah, it's not the simplest way.
I think it can be simplified. When you're meeting with an advisor and you don't have maybe access to your bank account, you don't know your passwords, you don't have everything at your fingertips, or maybe you're just driving down the road, listening to the podcast or working out right now, and you want to figure out, well, how much am I spending? There's a pretty simple equation that we'll use that I don't know where I learned this, but we've been using it for well over a decade now. And that was to say, all right, how much are you taking home every month?
Net.
And most people know what their take-home pay is, right?
Net.
They know what their take-home pay. They know what that paycheck is because it hits their direct deposit. They get their pay stubs. Like we know what that is. That means that's how much you're actually bringing home after you've put money into your 401k, after your health insurance deductions, et cetera.
Focus on the net.
Now you know what's actually coming in every single year. So if we know that number, then we can figure out what it is annually. Maybe you're paid bi-weekly, multiply it by 26 or whatever it is. We know what that number is. We take that number of how much we actually have coming in every year net, and then we say, all right, so last year you brought in X. Okay, now when you started the year last year, how much did you have in the bank? And I find most people know that number off the top of their head. They're like, we had about 50 grand in the bank. We had 100 grand in the bank.
Or 6 months ago, like you said, the person driving down the road, it's like, what was in your savings account January 1st? See what your net pay is. What's there today?
Yeah.
That's the excess you're saving.
So as far as that formula goes, take home pay times 12, that gives you your X, right? So you know what you took home last year, and then take your end of year bank balance and subtract it from your beginning of year bank balance, and that gives you the next very important number, Y, and then you want to look at the difference between those two things. So Y minus X in that instance, or sorry, X minus Y in that instance. So let's look at an exact kind of example of that. Let's say you're bringing home $10,000 a month times 12. You're bringing home $120,000 last year. So you brought home 120 grand last year, and then you're going to take that $120,000 and you're going to look at the difference between what you had at the end of the year, what you had at the beginning of the year. Let's say you ended the year with $120,000. started the year with $100,000, so your bank balances increased by 20 grand.
Grew.
You made $120,000. You grew your balance by 20. That means you spent $100,000 last year. And most of the time, if I go through that, people are like, "Whoa, where did it all go?" You know, I'm like, "Well, we need to figure that out, right?" Were there any abnormal expenses last year? You might have done a major remodel. You might have done something that you wouldn't normally do in retirement. I also often find, if there is a gap and you go, "Oh man, I don't know where all that went," do you want to be in retirement and have that same question?
You want to solve this before retirement.
You want to solve that beforehand. And I often find that, well, why don't we just plan around what you spent last year? Even if you had some abnormal expenses, you're going to have some abnormal expenses in retirement. So why not go ahead and why not go ahead and plan for that? I would prefer to have an extra buffer. We can reinvest the excess cash, or et cetera. Looking at it the other way, let's say you started the year with $100,000. So you started the year with 120,000, you ended the year with 100,000. So your bank balance went down by 20 grand. You made 120. That means you made 120, you spent an extra 20 out of your savings. So you spent 140 last year. So you actually spent more than you actually made in the previous year. So that's how I like to go through it with someone if we're just doing it on the fly. I don't think it has to be overly complicated when you're first starting to drill down into this, especially if you have an overfunded retirement. If you have an overfunded retirement, this can be more of a back of a napkin approach. If you have an underfunded retirement, or you have a tighter retirement, that meaning you haven't saved nearly as much as you might need, but then you really might need to drill down into those individual line items and spend a lot more time looking at those individual expenses you've had, not just last year, but the year before. Look at the last 3 to 5 years and make sure you're really honing in on that number.
Yeah, that's great. I think it's all great advice. Talking about overfunded versus underfunded, an easy way to figure that out is figure out how much you need from your nest egg to fund your lifestyle, and divide that by your lump sum nest egg. If it's greater than 3%, you're underfunded. If it's less than 3%, you're overfunded. It's an easy way to know where you're at and build a real plan from there. But I love these simple formulas for trying to understand, am I on track? Am I going to be okay?
We think what we just said was simple. And, and we go, no, that's way more complicated. Somebody's listening going, no, that's way more complicated than just looking at my bank statement every month.
I will say that this is the beauty of personal finance, right? Your brain and my brain don't work the same way. It just like spouses' brains don't work the same way. And what works for some may not work for others. But the bottom line is really understanding your spending. And he uses the great house analogy. I mean, we've struggled with the house analogy for years, talking about financial planning and
just so many different ways.
Foundation and the walls and the roof.
So it goes through expenses, right? You have to figure out those expenses before you do anything. But then all right, now I have my expenses. Now how do I organize my assets? And he's organizing those assets in the way you might build a house, thinking about the foundation, the walls, and the roof, really just assigning responsibilities to different assets.
Yeah, it's a bucket
approach.
Streams
that you have.
It's a bucket approach.
It is a bucket approach. It's a different type of bucket approach.
Yeah.
And
I like it.
And I think it's a way that we can understand. I think one of the things that's helpful about thinking about it as you might be building a home is when you build a home, you look at a blueprint first, right? You don't just execute and go, all right, here's
a couple of layouts. Here's a couple of layouts.
Wonder what I'm going to get. And no, you really want to take your time and meet with an architect, meet with a designer, meet with maybe you have an architect or designer that maybe fills a role in a financial standpoint like a CFP might, playing the quarterback, and then working with the GC, the subs, bringing in the electricians and all the best, subcontractors to make sure that house becomes a reality. And that's kind of how we work, right? You have your financial quarterback, your CFP, that's then going to find out what you need, what you want that house to look like, lay out a blueprint, and then go find the subs, go find the estate planning attorney, go find the tax attorney, go find the CPA, go find the investment managers, go out and find all the different tools and bring those things together to actually build that dream house and deliver that on the back end. But let's talk about those different layers. Let's talk about the foundation, the walls, and the roof, the way this person sees it, the way I see it, the way you see it, because there's a lot of different ways that we could look at these different sections of the home building process.
Right. He starts by talking about the foundation as your guaranteed income sources, your Social Security, your pension, any rental income. But I guess rentals aren't guaranteed either. So he's kind of mixing concepts there, but basically your income that's consistent, reliable, that's coming in the door every month.
Yeah. So real quick to go through it, right? You've got the foundation where he's saying, okay, these are your guaranteed income sources, Social Security, pension, et cetera. Then he goes to the walls and says, all right, you've got your walls here. Your walls are going to be made up of
stable, sort of protected assets.
Yeah, stable, relatively safe investments with minimal risk that add security for retirees, made up of CDs, fixed annuities, and bonds. This would be money for special occasions, vacations, hobbies, things that retirees often do in the first 10 years of retirement. So the way the author is laying out the financial or fiscal house for the families he's working with is foundation, guaranteed income sources. This is your non-discretionary income. Then you've got the walls. This is where you're going to satisfy those discretionary income needs. And then you get to the roof, which is made up of riskier type investments.
Stocks, bonds, 60-40, whatever.
Yeah, and saying, these are things that we would have for a 10-year plus time horizon. It's going to have to weather some storms, some trade shows. It's going to be a little volatile from time to time, and we're going to see some ups and downs there, right? And
you're going to lose a part of the roof every once in a while.
Yeah, and so I think the way that I look at this is you have the foundation, and the foundation to me should be those. I guess I don't know why an annuity would necessarily be in the walls. I'm looking at the foundation as the annuity or the pension or the Social Security. That should be all your guaranteed income sources. I would move the rentals up to the walls because we could lose our renters, right? We saw what happened during COVID, right? We can get in a position where we lose our rent. That is not a guaranteed income source. It belongs in the foundation to me. I think the foundation should be, all right, how much income do I want that's going to be secure, that's going to come in every single month? How much do I want in my emergency fund, my liquidity fund to be there that's going to be safe? So maybe we have our bank funds, our pension, Social Security, maybe some annuity income if we need some supplements or desire some to boost that lifetime income. Then we get to the walls, and the walls to me, these are things that you look at the foundation, it's just made up of one thing, right? It's just concrete. You look at a major storm that hits, and
there's plumbing in there, and there's
stuff there. But when a storm hits, all you see in the pictures is the foundation remaining. Right. But
so if you lose it all, you've got your guaranteed income sources. I like that.
All kinds of stuff in the walls. You might say, yeah, there's other stuff down there, but there's not a lot of stuff. Not like in the walls. You have drywall, you have wood, you have nails, insulation, you have flooring, insulation. You have all kinds of stuff.
Coffee cans with cash.
Yeah, you have all kinds of stuff in the walls. And that is a diversified way to generate your extra income, those discretionary income needs. This, to me, now we're taking on some risk, right? We wouldn't put a fixed annuity in the wall because we're not taking on risk with that asset. We wouldn't put a CD in the wall.
And that's what I was going to say. If you're talking about CDs or government bonds, I guess you could move those down to the...
I would move them down. And then when we look at the walls, we say, all right, here's our bonds, here's our dividend,
a little more
large
stable
cap equities. Yeah. These are the things that we're going to use for supplemental income that maybe you're willing to cut back on from time to time if the market or the economy is not performing real well.
And then you get to the roof is more of your higher
long-term growth assets.
Yep, your Roth IRAs, the things that are maybe all equities.
Growth equities, your small caps, your mid caps, your growth stocks. These are the things that are going to be a little bit more volatile.
I like our house better.
You're going to leave this thing alone for at least 10 years, maybe 15 or 20 years, and let it grow. These are going to be your inflation-protected assets that you may need to move down into the walls from time to time. Maybe move a little bit down into the foundation from time to time as we have things happen such as inflation or just life changes. That roof offers some flexibility. So that's how I view the house as a whole. How do you explain it?
You going to put a fence around it?
Well, the fence to me is the estate plan, right?
Keeps out the predators, keeps out the bears.
Yep, we've got the estate plan, which is the fence around that house. That's how I see it. Marshall,
I like it.
Do you explain it any differently when you're sitting down with someone and explaining the fiscal house?
No, I think I do it pretty much like you do. To me, it's more of a triangle than a house, right? So you got stability, anything that's safe, fixed, guaranteed. Then in the middle, maybe this is, as you mentioned, more conservative, moderate conservative investments.
And
then
those might be things
higher risk
that you're not going to touch, but it could still be part of the income plan to you. Right. So the first 10 years of income might be guaranteed
Yes.
with the foundation.
Yeah, there
Then
you go.
you may have some mid-risk assets in the walls.
Supplemental, hey, I need $5,000 to take my son to
Or
Disney
things that you're not
World
going to
or
touch for
whatever.
10 years and move back into the foundation in the future.
Give you
And-
some flexibility.
And you kind of see it as you're just kind of consistently moving those things if you have a laddered strategy. Well, okay, you're spending down a good chunk of assets in the safe bucket. Then we're going to move some from the walls down into the foundation. We've experienced some good growth in our roof. We're going to move some of those
Rebalance.
assets down into the walls. There's a rebalancing component of this as well.
Yeah, and I just love the iterative process of financial planning and getting back together with couples, and the way that we may have built their fiscal house 5, 7, 10 years ago may be changing, right? As he mentions, the market conditions change. Maybe they don't want to take on as much risk now that they're 72 as they did when they were 62, and so you're redoing the house a little bit.
You're remodeling.
You're remodeling.
You
There
need
you
to
go.
remodel
Couldn't
from
think of
time
that
to
word.
time, or you may need to downsize from time to time. You need to restructure the house. Maybe you need a whole new plan. I mean, quite often we see families that when they first come in to visit with us, maybe they're a couple of years out from retirement, and they have 90% of their assets on the roof. It's kind of a silly house. Your house is upside down. So let's restructure that so that it makes more sense for this time in your lives. Then you have families that we'll meet with that are maybe in their 80s, 85, maybe reaching their 90s. And the reality is they have too much in the foundation because they're going to leave everything behind to the kids. Maybe we need to make a bigger fence. Maybe we need to move some into the roof because this isn't your money at this point. You're never going to spend it. It's really planning for the kids' time horizon. So I love that, Marshall. It's a great analogy. It's a great way to think about your financial life, but build that home for yourself. It's a custom home. Okay, this isn't just a stock model home that we're making. This is a custom home, and you can make it whatever you like.